Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater, and I'm so delighted today to be joined by the wonderful Ariyon Bakare, who is currently starring in the HBO series His Dark Materials. I was interested in when you first took on the role and dove into the series, because when you first auditioned for it, you actually hadn't read the books at the time, and your character doesn't feature really in the first one. He comes in later in the series. So, beyond just reading the books, I was interested in when you took on the role, what some other useful tools were in terms of like research and not just understanding the world that he was stepping into, but like who he was as a character and some of those elements.
Well, it was really complicated because when I got the role, they sent me quite a few scripts. They sent me scripts and they sent me some pages. And I remember my audition was like about 5 pages long. And it was just dialogue after dialogue after dialogue. And so I thought I better just learn it. And I went in and kind of, even though I'm going to say, I killed that audition. I killed that audition. I did. I was quite pleased with myself when I finished doing the audition. And I remember I then went off to the States and I was doing a play over there. And my agent was like, "You have read the books?" And I go, no, I better buy them. So I bought all the books and I started reading them. And I phoned her up and I was like, "He's got nothing to do in this first season. What if I've learned 5 pages of dialogue and he's not even in the first season?" And she's going, no, don't worry. The second season is going to be really amazing. And, you don't know how the writers are going to be. And Jack Thorne's an amazing writer. So you could do some really amazing stuff. And so then I just thought, okay, let me just keep reading. And I read all the books. I then started to, what I like to do, I like to find out a bit more about the writers that are writing the actual scripts themselves. So I watched a lot of Jack's programs as well. So I was like, I just got myself entrenched in the whole world and basically the people who were working on the project. So I knew I can have a relationship with them that would make my working environment easier. So yeah, that was more of the research I can do. The research behind the book is so dense, trying to kind of work into existentialism and theology, and it was just so much other things that I kind of had inside myself anyway. These are questions that I was always asking myself as a young kid and kept asking myself even now, and I'm asking myself even now. So it was just always part of me, but to kind of do all the research, I could never do it. I couldn't. I think the most I did was look at Dante's Fire. That's what I did. I looked at that. That's a big one.
I also wanted to ask you about the character biography that you then created to put together a lot of the details beyond what we see in the scripts, because, like any character, we're only seeing them in a certain moment within time on screen. And I know that, you didn't just create the character biography, but you also took it to Jack Thorne and Jane Tranter, and they ultimately kind of sent it over to Philip Pullman, and he was like, yep, that's pretty much what I was thinking for him too. And I was interested in that because I wanted to ask about whether character biographies are something that you really put together and what the useful details of that are for you.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
And also whether that's something that you typically would share with the creative team, or if it was just specific to this instance.
No, I use a biography for every job I do. I do intense research for work. If I take a job on, I like to find out what physically the person's like. I like to know the history. There's so much work I do. So with this one, I took on board that he did have a demon, and I didn't really understand the demons, and I wanted to understand what that was about. And then I realized it's like our soul, and like that in the end, that basically it settles at a certain age. And I was intrigued by someone whose soul settles as a snake, and I was wondering, what does that feel like? If what are you saying about yourself, and what are you saying, how does the world perceive you? So going to them with all these ideas of like, I thought, well, if I can create this character that has almost got this illness that's writhing around him inside, and kind of it's strangling him, because that could be his ambition, that could be his want, that could be his need, even right to the point of his voice, that he wants to say more, he's so passionate about something but can't actually let it out, so he always holds it in. That could be quite an interesting character to play, which was kind of stepping away from the book a little bit, because the book was more of this guy who was a lot older than me, who was smiley and very ingratiating. I wanted to try and pull that back and make him more modern, and make him become someone who is divorced of emotion, who was holding all the emotion inside, And the only time you ever see him really go is when he's either very angry or he needs something. And so then, yeah, and everyone seemed to kind of go with what I was kind of aiming for. And yeah, so I was very lucky.
And you mentioned the physicality of him as a character, and that's one of the things that I find really interesting in your performance, because, you know, when he's in the magisterium, there's one version of who he is as a character, and then when he's in our world, you know, there's the fact that he has to keep his demon hidden, and he's kind of like almost even holding things back a little bit more, and kind of like even just the way that you come into scenes. I'm thinking of the one where he first runs into Lyra in our world at the museum, and you almost don't even feel his presence at first, and you're very much kind of just like gradually creeping in. And I was interested in how you just like really developed and crafted out those details so
I
specifically.
just thought that if you look at snakes, you don't see a snake until you actually almost step on them or step on one. And that's what I'd always thought. It's like he's someone who just moves around corners. You know, you don't see it until they're always camouflaged, you know, until they want to make themselves known. And I was quite intrigued by that as a physicality. You know, I started off as a dancer, so that I'd always, whenever I kind of look at a character, I start from that perspective first. I go, well, okay, look how the physicality, and see how the physicality affects the emotion and how it affects my thought processes and the way I speak. So yeah, so that was like, I really kind of thought about that with the two worlds. There's a magisterium, which is kind of quite regarded, and there's a decorum that you have to carry. And then there's our world, where you have someone who has something he's hiding inside, and it's churning. And it's almost like, yeah, I class it as like my intestines are being squeezed, and so he has to hold it really tightly, and it's just writhing around inside of him. And yeah, it's his passion, his need, his wants. He's unable to achieve what he wants to get. So instead of it being like we want something so badly, but we can't tell people we want it, but we keep it inside, but we know it's inside there. And it's like, I've got to get this out. And that's what that's one thing I really was determined to play with, is what his deeper wants were, especially in this world, and why it hurts him so much.
Mm-hmm. And you also even use that detailing down to the way that you look at people in the scenes, and kind of that hypnotic gaze where he's very much just observing the other characters, almost waiting for them to slip up so he can gain that little bit more power.
You've been really watching the show. yes. Almost, why did they really realize this? What my acting techniques are? Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. Yeah. That is like my.
A lot of choices that you made with the other actors and scene partners, and the way that you come into scenes and the way that you interact with them in that way.
Well, no, because most people didn't really know what I was doing at the time. At the time, I wouldn't tell people. You don't tell another actor, this is what my technique is. You know, you just go off and do your technique and hope they understand it. Yeah, there was this thing of me just, when I would speak to someone, I always wanted to be like, I'd be really looking beyond them, beyond their soul. And if I could really entice them in, that was my ingratiation. That was me looking at the book and thinking, oh, well, that's how Charles Latram would ingratiate someone. He'll do it with a smile. I'm younger, so I don't need to do it that way. I can do it with just my gaze. I can look at someone. It look like I'm really into what you're saying. I really believe you, and you believe me. And like, I'm doing it to you now. You're just looking into my eyes. You're not looking around my eyes. You're right into it.
Like you're tricking me into something right now.
I'm tricking you. You're going to give me all those books behind, and that reindeer is all mine.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you know, some of your study as well, because you mentioned how one of the classes that you took in drama school was actually all to do with building a character off of an animal. And I was wondering if that actually was something that really came back to you, particularly with the development of this character, because of the specificity of how you work with your demon.
I went to a really great drama school called Drama Center, and we had really amazing teachers. And we would always do these classes called animal classes, where you'd actually create a character through an animal. And so I've always kind of used it in several different characters. I've actually used the same technique. And what you find is a physicality. And in this one, I found for Lord Boreal, the way he walked was through looking at snakes, kind of almost, I wanted the idea that he glided. You know, it's almost that he's, you know, even when he sits down, he slides into place. There was nothing about him just being really, everything's supposed to be like this kind of gentle, as if he can slide over undulated kind of floors. He's always connected. You know, even the way he touches things, the way he moves, the way he closes his eyes, everything is supposed to be just this idea that there's a physicality of a snake. I don't know how else to, you know, yeah. So yeah, I did. I kind of looked at snakes. There was a time I was actually thinking of getting one. I wanted to have a tattoo of one on my arm, but then that didn't go the way I wanted to, because I think it just ended up as a dot, because I didn't want the pain.
One of the production elements with the show that I think is so wonderful is that they didn't just have you rely on following a ping pong ball for your eye line with the other demons, that they actually had a puppetry team on site to reenact some of them. And I wanted to just ask about how valuable that was and how that was a really useful tool for scene interactions in terms of the connectivity that you're then able to have.
It was really great watching everybody else have their puppets, but mine was a real snake. So there was a big difference. I loved everybody else's puppets, but every time it was me, it was really hard. So what they would do is actually have a proper snake kind of literally go all over my body. And there was scenes where, there's one scene where I had the snake wrap around it just literally curled around my face. And that was pretty terrifying. But I thought, well, I better carry on, you know. I remember my first day, they asked me how was I with snakes. I went, yeah, I'm fine, and like I love them, and brilliant. And they came in and they brought this little yellow snake and they put it in my hands, and I was like completely frozen. I was like, oh yeah. And I was so worried that if I said no, I hated snakes, I'd lose my job. That basically they were just like, you know. So I was like, yeah, I loved it. And I remember the puppeteers saying, oh, your reaction to the snake was so perfect. And I was saying, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I'm not really a big snake person, but I kind of got used to my snake by the end of it. That sounds so bad. I got used to my snake. I did.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about working with Ruth Wilson, who plays Mrs. Coulter on the show, because there's such an interesting kind of juxtaposition between those two characters. And you've mentioned how you even see Lord Boreal as kind of like a male counterpart to her character. And so because of that, I wanted to ask whether, you know, the two of you were kind of very much in the early stages of filming, like looking to how the other was capturing their character, inhabiting them to kind of inform the way that you wanted to play a little bit.
No, I think it happened by accident. I don't think we were so separate for quite some time, and there seemed to be this power couple within the story, and it seemed to be the male and the female kind of version happening all the time. And she was stronger than me, and like I always wanted her to be my trophy wife. So there was this kind of quality of me wanting to please her. We never saw what we were doing whilst we were filming until we got together. And when we did, it was like, oh my gosh, these two are really badass. I think the storytelling, Jack's writing was so brilliant. He created these two characters that just worked off the page. Literally, as we read, it was like, this just works. You know, you got two people who just worked really well together. Ruth is a phenomenal actress, and when you work with her, you can only bring your A game on. There's just nothing more you can do. You're just like, okay, I've just got to keep up. And she's quick, she's fast, she's wickedly devilish, and it's like amazing to play with, and you just want to be like, oh, I want to be there, I want to be in that ballpark all the time. So yeah, I enjoy I loved working with her. I think she's one of the best actresses we have at the moment. So
in terms of her stylistic approach as an actor and what her process brings to the table against yours, what were kind of the ways that they complemented each other and were similar or juxtaposed each other as they kind of like came together in this collaborative space when you were working on scenes together?
I think in the end, we were both actors. We're both actors. We've been doing for quite a long time. That we kind of, what you do, you have your technique, you have all of that stuff you work before you get on set. Then when you get onto set, you just allow yourself to play, and you see what comes out of it. And because we're both very technical, I think we both have got a very strong theatre background. So we were able to just get back into once we're doing a scene, we're just in the scenes, and we're able to just play the scenes together and play it with our own intentions. So as long as our intentions are quite clear, then we're playing the scene quite clearly as well. So we were always quite precise about that. So I think that's where our experiences kind of helps us as actors, where I think we have this clarity in what our approach is, and we work really hard. I would say Ruth is one of the hardest working actresses I've ever worked with. She really works hard and really detailed, and so sometimes I'd watch her and I was completely in awe of everything she did.
Yeah. And similarly, I mean, I know that when you were in the Royal Shakespeare Company, that you weren't just doing roles there, that you were taking on other jobs and kind of jumping back and forth between projects.
Yeah.
I think it's so fascinating, especially because of like the density of what you're doing with the Royal Shakespeare Company and then taking on additional roles. But kind of, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the tools and the skill set that you really developed from being able to dive between different spaces, and how that really helps you just to very easily jump into scenes, particularly with a project like this in television where everything's so fast moving and fast paced and you have to make such quick choices.
I don't know if that's actually happened from doing the Royal Shakespeare Company. The Royal Shakespeare Company was a really great stepping stone for me. I think I learned that actually when I went off to do something like a soap, I did Doctors for ages, and the turnaround for that is so quick. I mean, I'd say you're doing like 15 pages a day. It's so fast. You just don't have time to think. You're given a scene and you're just like, okay, just come up with it, whatever you want to do. And you have to rely on your instincts quite quickly. So I was really lucky in my career that I have done every single discipline. I've done theatre, I've done films, I've done soaps, I've gone back into films, I've gone back. So I've worked all different kind of angles. So I've learned so much as an actor of how to be very quick, how to take my time, when to ask the right questions. I think that's the most important as any actor. All actors have got to know when to ask the questions, when to rely on my own skills, when to trust myself. That's the best thing you can have as an actor, is like when to just go, okay, I'm going to trust what I'm doing and just allow it to happen. Because when you think you're doing the worst thing ever, it's usually your best. So yeah, I would say, I think what that question is, I draw from so many aspects of my life and aspects of my career to that's allowed me to kind of do what I do now. Even my failures, even like the auditions that I didn't get, that no one sees, it's even from those sort of things where I've looked back at them and I go, oh yeah, that's that, that's this, that's that. So yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. In terms of kind of knowing when to ask the right questions, for this particular project, what were some of the questions that you had early on for Jack that were really helpful and valuable for you in terms of developing the character and stepping into this world?
How much scope did I have between playing what was in the book and how much could I create myself? I was told at the beginning that we wanted this new Labour quality. There's someone who was was enjoying the treasures from this world so much that he was kind of getting further and further away from his old world. So that made me fall into the pattern of asking. I wanted to ask questions based on those kind of things, like, well, one of the big questions I asked was, how does he hide his demon in our world? And what's it like when he is free of his demon in our world? So when he's behind closed doors in his own home, what does it feel like? What does it feel like not to be carrying this burden on you all the time, the worry, your so, this thing that's talking to you 24/7? And does he talk? So we had a lot of conversations based around that, really.
And in terms of a lot of the spaces that you're filming in, with there being so much CGI in terms of the production design, what's useful for you to know from the creative team in terms of what that's going to look like? How many details do you want to have, or do you even need
as much detail? You need as much details as possible, and a good director will actually guide you through that. I've been very lucky. I've worked with the Wachowskis, and they do big, massive CGI sequences. And there's one time when I was working with them, and I was running, and I ran onto set, and I heard, Ariyon, you've just run into 10,000 army of men. I was like, all right, okay. And it's one of those moments where you kind of need all those little bits of details to help you kind of create the landscape. So yeah, we're really, with His Dark Materials, we had such a great production team that actually there was not that much CGI effect. Most of it was there. When from my scenes, a lot of it was there, so I could touch something that was real. In this season, you're going to see where I live, and you're going to be like, wow, every single part of my character came alive when I saw my house. It was like, all right, this is me, and it made me feel good because that's what I was always aiming to play in the first place, and seeing it was like, okay, this is it. So yeah.
Once you saw that location, because it's so kind of deliciously production designed in terms of like the details and the props that they place around, were there kind of added details and layers that helped you with in terms of your character once you saw
it? Everything. The one thing it helped me with was space, because the floors were flat and the floors were smooth and everything, it was silky, even the texture of the sofa. So everything I would do would be about sliding across the textures and the coldness of the glass and the way I wouldn't touch it. It was these things that would make me just go, it seemed everything was so together and perfect. And yet there were corners to hide. And it's just something about it that made me just play in a different way. Even the colors, it was beautiful.
Have the costumes been really valuable to you as well in terms of the way that they've designed it with such a specific look, and it kind of even adds to that?
Caroline McCall is one of the best costume designers I've ever worked with. I think what she helped me create that character, to the point of the way she even would tie my necktie, which would be slightly tighter, or the collar would be slightly higher, just to give me that little bit of length, even to the point of the shoes would give me a bit of height. The way the suit fitted, it would make sure it's a little bit tighter, so it gave me that kind of elegance. I really am in awe and praiseworthy to Caroline for her work on that, because it was phenomenal. And I'm sure when you look at Ruth as well, you see the same thing. She just gave us these characters that were so like, it seemed as if we were imprisoned by etiquette. And you see it with the way we dress, especially with the magisterium, and then you see us in the new world, and you see me that's a little bit more relaxed, and things are kind of hanging a bit looser. And this was a big conversation between us, and she's amazing. She's just brilliant.
Yeah,
I really think she's brilliant. I love her. Absolutely love her. I'll take her everywhere. If I can have her in my pocket. Caroline, come out now.
You'd be impeccably everything in your life.
And she was my personal dresser.
Yeah. I was also interested in kind of like the tone of the show, because the second season, as we're diving deeper into the story, tonally becomes much darker. And I was interested in terms of how that influenced your character, and whether that allowed you to even just, dive even further to the choices that you'd already made and really expand upon where you were taking him.
It was surprising because it had got so darker. And as the show got darker, I had to find another means, another way in. And so we went for more the vulnerable side. And sometimes I don't know when I walk into a scene and how the scene's going to end up. And so Ruth and myself were doing a scene, and as we were doing it, I remember I just felt vulnerable. And I go with those feelings. If that's how I feel at that moment, that's how I feel, then the scene's about that. Because it's not worth me acting on top of it. And I'm like, I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. I'm just going to go. And I feel vulnerable. And then I realized that's Boreal feeling vulnerable at that moment, that he's in this moment where he could, that's what we see in this season. His dark side, the darkest part of him, is that he gets more and more vulnerable. And as he gets more and more vulnerable, he gets colder and colder and colder, because he's trying to always control that. He doesn't want anyone to see that side of him.
Yeah. And in terms of that vulnerability as well, whenever you have a character or a person who kind of exhibits these types of megalomaniac and kind of like power grab behaviors and just like that coldness and that stillness, it tends to come from a place of hurt or a place of insecurity. And so was that something that you really thought in depth about where those traits developed in earlier life?
Yeah, I did. I kind of looked at it like the Magisterium was the old clique, and he was always the one on the outside, and he was never really he was never really allowed into the brotherhood. He was the dog's body, he was the person who works for everybody else, but he always wanted to. He had these, he had these peerage which he probably bought. It wasn't something that was given to him. And I was like, going, well, this is a guy who, when they were younger, watched them all be so brilliant. He watched Azrael. He wanted to be Azrael. He wanted to be, all of those guys. He was like, I want to be those people. And they didn't even see me until I was making my own stuff. So when he comes to our world, he's like, I'm just going to be this really powerful man. And then people are going to see me and take note of me again. And that's why he's so bullish. That's why he's so determined. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask a little bit about working with Daphne Keane, and just what she brings to the table as a performer, and also just the experience of working alongside her and getting to watch her kind of evolve as she kind of grows her craft through working on the show and playing such an intensive role.
Daphne's just a really talented young girl. I saw her work before when she did Wolverine, and I was like, who's that young woman? And her personality off screen is just as powerful as the personality she brings on screen as well. She's a bright, intelligent young woman who's feisty, and she has this kind of, she is the empowerment of women today. And I'm glad that young girls are going to be really looking at her as a hero, because like she really does just embody that really well. And as an actress, she's learning her craft, and she's just working every single moment. She's in every single scene, and she does it with an ease. She never complains. She's just humble. I think the two young kids in this are just brilliant. They show me how to be on set. They make me laugh. We're very funny together. We muck around a lot. But yeah, they're just brilliant. They're two of my favorite actors. I keep calling everyone favorites, but I love the job so much. But yeah, they were just two lovely people to work with. So her and Will are amazing.
Yeah. And one of the projects that you spearheaded and put together during the last few months in quarantine has been your project I Care, that I wanted to talk a little bit about. That was really about, starting to create more conversation around racial injustice, and was something that sounds like it began as like, your kind of close community, people that you'd worked with, people that were friends and family, and having these conversations in more of a public platform. But it's really kind of already grown exponentially and has kind of like become more of an international conversation. And I wanted to ask a little bit about the genesis of it, but also if it's something where you've started to see these conversations turn into results and influence change, even just in small ways at this point.
Yeah, well, the genesis of it started with what happened with George Floyd. I was at home when I saw the video, and it was one of the most upsetting things I've ever seen. And I couldn't realize that. I didn't realize I was going through a traumatic experience myself, because it was something I realized over years and years and years. I've seen something like that happen in my life. Not that I was physically knee-necked, but I felt the burden of being a black man in a white world, and how I might have been pushed to one side on so many different occasions. And I just realized I was tired. I was tired of it. I was tired of this continuous racism that we have in the world, this hatred for others just because of the color of their skin. And so I went off and I called my friends, and the first thing I said, oh, you're racist. And they're like, what? Am I racist? And no, of course I'm not racist. And we'd have all these conversations, and realized there were so many conversations there were so many questions they wanted to ask me about race. And there were so many questions I wanted to ask them about race. And these were questions that we dare not ask because we were always scared of offending each other. So I then decided to create a platform where people could have a conversation about racial equality. And racial equality is about demystifying our inherited ideologies about one race. because racism is inherited. So I wanted to demystify that quickly, and I wanted to change people's perspectives. I then was very lucky that people started to send conversations in, and these conversations were very moving. People were telling me they were very cathartic to write, and it just rollerballed. We just had people. I had my nephew working with me, Lucy and George, and we created this website, and we went on marches. We sent out, we took masks, and we handed out to people so they can protect themselves through the marches. And I saw young people basically standing up for what they believed in, and it made me realize that it's time for me to stand up and do something as well, because I've sat on the sidelines watching, or posting and saying, oh, I like your this, and yes, I support you for this, but never really doing something myself. So I Care came out of me wanting to do something that was progressive, that moved the conversation forward. It wasn't once you finish marching, once you finish writing your placard, you have to do something beyond that. And the only thing I can think of is education and conversation. And those two go hand in hand. And people need to converse and need to be educated and re-educate themselves in order to change this insipid darkness of racism, of homophobic behavior, of all the sexism. When we're in 2020, we've got to just kind of re-educate all of ourselves. All of us need to re-educate ourselves. We all need to know how to I need to know how to communicate with you. You need to know how to communicate with me, so that we then can just see each other. We can look in each other's eyes, not around my eyes, into my eyes, and we can have a proper conversation. And that's really what I want to be able to do. Is just, I'm bored. Aren't you?
Yeah.
You bored? I just want to be able to just talk to someone, and I don't care about your color. I don't want to be. No, I don't want to be on that. I don't want to be in that arena anymore, and I don't want to leave that for my nephews and my godchildren, and and the people I love. I want them to live in a world where they just don't see that. And I know it's a long way ahead. I know it's hard. I mean, it might never ever happen in my lifetime, but at least I feel as if I've done something. And so far, what we have and what the response has been so great, has been so brilliant. And some days I wake up and even like a couple of days ago, I woke up and I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I feel as if it's just draining me, and I've got to walk away. And then I get a text message, or I get an email, or I get someone slides into my DMs and says to me, look, thank you so much. This has happened to me. I really want to share this story. Can I share it on your platform? And I'm like, yeah, come and share it. And that makes me feel good, and that's the importance of it. That's why it's so important.
Yeah, no, I think it's so fantastic that you've created this space and that it's having such an incredible impact directly, and those are the things that can hopefully start moving things forward. And thank you so much for talking to us about that, and also diving in so in depth for his dark materials. Thank you so much, Ariyon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.